Cool, Scooby-Doo. So, yeah. Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer. Dani Katz is here with me. This is Words, episode number 59. And Dani was just telling me about her newfound finger puppet obsession. I, too, have been through finger puppet obsession. So you tell me yours, and then I'll tell you mine.
Okay. This is our version of I'll show you more. I'll show you mine. Okay, so a little backstory. This started because for the past 2 years, I have asked every single in-person friend I have to do the following skit with me. It's 2 suits wearing reptilian masks, and they're in the green room behind every television show, every movie, every newscast, every podcast. Like Ross and I call it high 3 because of the claws, but they're doing a commentary on how their minions are doing, shilling their propaganda nonsense. And I hit the wall on not finding anyone who's willing to do this with me. And I have a bag of finger puppets that a friend gave me. And Ross suggested last week, why don't you just do it with your finger puppets? Because there's a snake and an alligator. And it was like ding, 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 ding. And I'm not kidding. I've gotten obsessed. I have no acting chops. I have no puppeteering chops. I lose track of the voices, but like, I didn't even go to dance yesterday because I just want to play with my finger puppets and figure out how to do it and make videos. And P.S. I did post my first one, so everyone go find it on my locals, my YouTube, because they're pretty spazzy and ridiculous.
Okay, so I have a couple comments for that. Do you remember rolling way back in Flashdance? There was that guy who took one, I don't know if it was the guy who took Ginny to the strip bar or whatever, but there was a guy dressed with the alligator crocodile head, remember?
Okay, wait, we have to pause because that guy is the guy who introduces Joe Rogan on Joe Rogan's intro credit voiceover. It's the same guy.
Okay, so you know who I'm talking about. Okay, okay, so this is actually perfect because this idea of the reptilians in the green room has come up when we've been talking about Joe Rogan on this show before.
Totally.
But also, my thoughts were, have you seen any of the shows, the new shows I've done with the guy, Look Out for Charlie?
No.
So, okay, he's an expert in the ELF field and the background sound and sonic weaponry. And according to him, right, and I agree with him, I've been following him for years and we just kind of connected and started doing some shows, that a lot of things that people think is like a weapon being directed at them is not. It's a background field that has all of this sound, and some people become heightened in their sensitivity to it. So one of the features of it is there's what he calls chatterbots, right? That seems to be talking about whoever is sensitized enough to hear it. Right. And the chatterbots are always commenting on what the person is actually doing. So like the target individual that thinks that they're having, sounds beamed into their head literally hears people talking about them. Right. And according to him, it's not actual people. It's like an AI that's sort of doing this kind of thing. Right. But the way you describe the reptilians sitting in the background talking about what their minions are doing, it would be funny to layer that on top of that. Oh, this is like a background sound field that just creates these sounds that talks about the minion, right? So I'm layering all this stuff on top of one another. So we have the Flashdance layer, we have the Charlie, Look Out for Charlie layer, right? Where there's this AI that is riding on something that is a natural phenomenon. There is a background sound field of noise that records every sound that's ever been made, and for some reason is able to sort of play it back to you. And then there's this technology that has sort of co-opted that and used it as a surveillance weapon, but it's not people who are doing the talking. It's like AI chatterbots that somehow know how to talk about what the exact right minute to offer commentary to the person who's worried about what they're doing, right?
Okay, so now you're inspiring me. I want to get my tech skills up to speed because I wanted my characters to be talking while video's going behind me, mine with, if I had a green screen and if I had tech skills, I could set that up, but I haven't figured out how to do that. So I've been using the jankiest backgrounds, but with what you're talking about, we could do it now and just have the little puppets having their background noise behind us. Like I kind of just want to quit everything I'm doing and only do puppets right now.
Well, then we could take it a step further. So one of the coolest things that Charlie does is he'll find videos of like, so he does a couple of things. Like he'll go in and he'll find a video where there's a person who like was like quote unquote shooter, right? Doing the thing. And like he can find sounds in the background of the video, right? Like the surveillance video that are basically talking about what the person is doing. Right. So like you have somebody who like you have the video of the person doing the thing. And when he plays with the levels in the background, you can hear commentary that is coming from where, right? That like kind of thing. He's even found it in like, there's a guy who has making a video about how he created a technology to block the frequencies that bother people who say they're targeted individuals. In the video, Charlie's able to bring up sounds of, as you would say, the reptilians commenting on the stupidity of this idea that the person that they're targeting, right, kind of thing. Like he's so you could make your video about all this, and then Charlie can run it through and see if there's an AI chatterbot somewhere in the background field commenting on the fact that you're commenting. Like,
and then we can have the puppets commenting on that. It's just like meta, goes on forever.
Goes on forever, right? Okay, but let me just, so like back years ago when the first round in Austin here, right? I lived pretty close. I lived in a nice apartment and it was pretty close to the Austin City Music Hall, which is where like a lot of the raves and parties were. So a lot of times the after party would end up at my place, right? And after one party, me and my friend Ramsey were sitting around. He was a DJ. He used to play like hard house, and we were fucked up. And we started doing. I had these finger puppets, right? Like my mom had become obsessed. Like back in the 90s, if you went to Starbucks, they had like candy canes with finger puppets on them, like for children. They have like children's toys and candies and snacks. My mom became obsessed with these finger puppets on the candy canes. And then we started buying other finger puppets. So I had a huge collection of finger puppets, and Ramsey found them. And we were doing like a finger puppet show to the hard house music, right? Like, and we became obsessed with this. We talked about this shit nonstop for like, that became the whole thing. Like, let's go home after the party and do the hard house puppet show, you know? So there's something very, it allows you to say the thing you want to say that wouldn't be acceptable for you to say in your Danny Katz persona, right? Exactly. But here's the thing, and this is where like this can get into a lot of what we're talking about today. These puppets that we're dealing with this time are more like finger puppets than the puppets of old, right? Like when you had puppets of the establishment or a system or some sort of like shadowy cabal or group, they were really well done. They were more rounded out. It took years, if not decades, to sort of uncover. And then even if you did, it was sort of questionable. And there was no. These guys, like, these are finger puppets now, right? They have like one show only that they can, like each finger.
No limbs. They can't make a lot of facial expressions, movements. They're so limited.
Right? So anyway, this is a finger puppet show. Totally. Anywho, yes. So I understand like finger puppets, like you should get a really good collection going. If I can find any of mine, I don't know whatever happened to them. I have to see if I can find some, I will ship them your way.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I have a pretty good collection. My friend Alia, she, works for this company that they donate seeds to kids and butterflies, and it's really sweet. And these women I think it's in Ecuador, they hand knit these finger puppets as part of their promo. So I have a huge bag of them. I need to get better at like the voices and then remembering the voice that I'm using and like.
No, it's more fun if you don't, because some of these finger puppets forget which role they're playing. Totally. And they think they're some, right? No. It's kind of better if you can, I mean, a little bit of separation is nice, but you don't need to get like too obsessive about that. But the other thing you could do is if there's anybody out there that owns a finger puppet company and would like to have, would like to sponsor Dani, right?
Yeah. Then also, if anyone can teach me how to get my videos in the background, please teach me that. I'm welcoming that.
All right. Okay. So I think this is good for you. I like this. I like this tact for you. So
thank you.
It would be cool if somebody could make you a Sadie finger puppet so that Sadie could play along too.
That would be good. Right? We only have animals now.
Right. It would be good with like if there were Sadie and then animals, right? It'd be kind of like Dora the Explorer that goes along with everywhere, right?
I would love that.
Yeah.
Speaking of, one of our listeners who's amazing asked if I needed music for my new podcast, and he sent me a few tracks, and there's one of them that I'm listening to and I'm like, God, these voices sound familiar. And I messaged him and I'm like, did you sample Emily and me in this song? And he's like, oh yeah, I forgot to ask your permission. Is it okay? I need to send it to you. It might be our new music. It's really funny.
Okay, good. All right. Okay, so yes, so the finger puppets are the way to go. All right. Speaking of the finger puppets, so I think we didn't do any pre-show because I just didn't want to lose the puppet fun.
Right.
So I thought we could talk about your what you've been digging into with Consilience and what you wanted and Lifeboat and whatever, some of that here in the first segment. And in the second segment, I have to talk about that Rebel Wisdom with Daniel Pinchbeck.
I'm so glad that you sent that.
I have to. There's so much stuff going on there. And it's like that was a display of many things. And yeah, okay.
Yeah, that was amazing. Okay, so before we start, I would like to start with a public service announcement because I went to see Alana Friedman speak. Freeland on Saturday, and sat next to a spook who had very little humanity in him. And this is my public service announcement for the truthers. Stop speaking about their ops as though they're a done deal and giving them the power of saying, and this is going to happen, and this, and then they're going to do this, and it's already done for. It is us fueling their bullshit. Nothing is a done deal. Just because they have plans doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen. And I'm inviting us to be way more mindful of how we communicate about our research about their plans and stop moving them forward with that languaging. Like I've really hit the wall with it.
So did you meet Alana?
I didn't meet her. I asked one question, which was, has any of your research taken you back to Santa Fe Institute? And she started laughing and she said, no, but I have done quite a bit of research on them. And I just kind of wanted to get out of there. So I didn't stay after to ask.
Okay. So I've actually challenged Alana on my show about the very thing that you said, right? Because so Alana is incredibly brilliant researcher, right? And it's funny because she has like this neat, she puts out that information, she talks about things sort of in the way that you're saying, but if you can break through that, she's really well versed in a lot of things, and she can almost, in fact, I think Michael and I are going to invite her to play the glass bead game with us because she's really, she wrote that Sub Rosa America series. She's very familiar with like the James Shelby Downard like way of taking on information, but there's something I think she feels a responsibility to make sure that people really get the possibilities here. And I think in trying to make sure that that gets across, she sometimes falls into that, what you're talking about, right? Yeah. And certainly the people that follow her. So I've done several shows with her. I think she's a lovely person. I like her a lot. And I've also been to one of her talks. Mm-hmm. And when I went to one of her talks, I found the audience to be very troubling, and not troubling from the sense of like, well, maybe it is another form of being asleep, right? Like I found that there was just so much of the energy of what you're talking about, of like, something is happening to us. This is being done. We're all victims and we have very little power. And there was an energy there that felt like an AA meeting or an Al-Anon meeting, or like just, it's an energy that like, I was like, wow, this is, and I don't find her like, even though, like I said, she has both, but she has like a really wide range, right? She definitely has some of that, but if you can open her up and start to throw, like you threw something completely unexpected at her and she laughed, and she knows what you're talking about, right? She knows what you're talking about, and probably she can go there with you. But I think that like for her, she also sees that like okay, the kind of following that she's developed helps keep that information somewhat at the forefront, so people can't say that they haven't been warned. But I've gone back and forth with you, and I actually had this show with her like 2 or 3 years ago. I'll say, if I can find it, I'll send it to you, where I pressed her on that, like, about this, is the way we're going about this actually contributing to that kind of thing. It has to be hard. I get into this sometimes with Sophia as well too, when you, and the same thing could be said about like the Alison McDowell material. Whenever you are way out ahead of everyone else in terms of understanding the various technologies and the way they work together in a way that most people are only looking at like one topic, when you've sort of been able to synthesize a couple and you see a picture developing that most people not only can't see yet, but don't even have the capacity to be able to understand, like you kind of self-appoint, you appoint yourself as the, I have to make everybody understand this thing. And there's a part of that that is like a noble goal. There's a part of that that is like, someone has to do it. And then there's another part of that that is like, whoa, wait a second, right? Like, especially in the case, like the people who are doing it, they're all very smart women. They're probably at least in a few arenas, overestimating the progress that the fucktards have made, and actually helping to to outline a tactic or a use of the technology that either hasn't been considered yet, or like if it has been considered, hasn't really been thought would work. But if you can get enough people sort of on, even like there's this friction, like, right, when you have something that opposes you, it sort of gives you something to press off of, right? We've talked about this with gymnastics before, like, even people who aren't super powerful being able to get tremendous height and rotation and things like that based on understanding how to use the opposite force to generate power for yourself. So there is that thing. But I think if you had a one-on-one conversation with her, you'd find that that there'd be some of that, and then you could open up that same pocket you did for a second, with the SFI thing, right? So yeah.
To be clear, this is less about, is it Alana? Is that how you pronounce it?
Alana Freeland, yeah.
Yeah, so it's less about Alana. I thought she was lovely and she did a great job.
Yeah.
And I also know, like, all of us, who are at the forefront of this intense research, like I understand disseminating with a sense of urgency, in a sense as a means of waking people up to it and course correcting, but it's more about people in our community. And it's specifically, like you were talking about the audience members in her talks. And it's like this unconscious, egoic way of saying like, well, I know this and I have all this information, and then it gets transmitted through this kind of lazy speech pattern of
totally
the intentions with
Yes.
what will happen. And I don't think that the people in our community realize how much that is fueling ops that don't necessarily need to come to pass. Like, that was my perspective on the lollipop from the get-go. And
Right.
Early 2020, when all the people in the community here were talking about, and they're going to force and this and that, and I was like, whoa, with this definitive languaging, because we can absolutely take a million pivots. So I see our community really playing into these ops unconsciously by giving them so much power.
So two things. So first of all, you're 100% right, because remember, in the very beginning, they themselves were saying there's no way there will ever be a mandatory lollipop, right? And then people kept saying there's going to be a mandatory lollipop. And then so they're like, well, shit, if they think we're going to mandatory lollipop, we may as well mandatory lollipop and see how it goes.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
And also the fact that like there's a group of people that are insisting on mandatory lollipop that everybody sort of is opposed to anyway. So we can make the mandatory lollipop a good idea because these people that are so so that
it legitimizes shit that we don't want, and we need to stop doing it. I've mentioned I had a normie boyfriend back in 2018 who was like preemptively up in arms about them getting rid of Roe versus Wade, and back then I was like, what are you talking about? That's insane. Like, you're creating a problem that it's like when you pick it as it that is not as it, and then you create
yes.
And that's exactly what's happening. So I'm just talking to our people, like, let's just stop doing that.
100%. And the other thing that was weird was my experience when I was at Alana's talk, right? It's a group that like meets recurrently, that is like a geoengineering watch kind of group, right, in Los Angeles. And they always would meet at this one coffee place and whatever. What was so interesting to me was like there was a level of almost like paralysis, and like, I guess that the only way I know how to say it is like self-Stockholm syndrome, right? Like almost like, or what that I only ever think I displayed when I was on drugs. And I'm looking around at all these people. I'm like, are these people tweakers? Right? Because by this point I was probably 2 years clean, maybe 3 years clean. And like, I don't think they're tweakers, but they're acting and looking exactly like a certain stage of tweaker that I knew in my life was like, not all of them, right? Like there's a range, right? And then I started to realize that like, oh, okay. So it's been long my suspicion that like a lot of the technologies were experimented on first in the drug, with like putting them in the drugs because nobody cares about those people, right? And they can, if any weird stuff that goes on, oh, they're on drugs, so blah, 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 right? And then I started to realize, well, like all these people who hold these, you know, strong awarenesses, because a lot of the things they're aware of are true, but then they also have beliefs about them. They are looking for an external solution to the problem. Well, there's no greater external solution to your problem than drugs, right? Like that's like the classic external solution. So a lot of these people are using products, right, to try and alleviate or counteract what they think is coming to them, and the chemicals and whatever. So like they've set themselves up as a target audience to somebody being able to infiltrate one of those companies that makes those products and put the very shit in there that they're trying to counteract by using those products, right? That was the feeling I walked away with. I left that thing going, are these people all like fucking like exhausted tweakers? That's what it felt like. Like when you get to the end of the road as a drug addict, it looks a lot different than when you're like at the height of your crazy behavior and you're partying and shit like that. Yeah. Like this felt like a bunch of end of the road tweakers. Yeah. Right. On a certain level, they were all very nice people. So I don't mean this, but like the self-defeatism and the like seemingly sort of loyalty to an invisible God that is also like your own mind. Like it's weird, right? Like kind of thing. It was weird, right? Like it was weird. And she gave a great talk. And also like there was a sense in there that like some of the people were trying to get her to reaffirm or to validate their own victim stories or their own extension. Like imagine, like her research goes far enough. Like you don't need to amplify that to make it seem crazier and further out there than hers does. Right. But some of these stories seem to be trying to push it into that territory, right? Yeah. And it was just, yeah, it felt like that's what it felt like to me. And so I understand the assessment that you come away from that with. But I think she's done, like, it's a massive job to have done what she's done in terms of like collating and bringing together and like understanding and synthesizing all that information. Yeah. Like, I wish that we I don't know what the solution is, because I do understand like the information can be traumatizing for people, and it takes like, you know, either a certain personality or just getting to a certain point where you're like sick and tired of being assaulted by that, like that energy of that information, for you to break out of it and say, okay, this may be going on and this is what I'm doing. And that's, you know, and I think that it's hard.
I think it's another expression of how we're all indoctrinated to think that we're powerless, because I rarely see conversations about what's the pivot, What's the solution? How would we rather it go? Okay, so instead of this, what will it be? And it's like this laziness that has infected our culture, because for so many generations, we've been indoctrinated to think that we don't have authority, that we don't have agency to decide which way our world goes. Like, no one else has more right to steering our earth ship than any one of us. We're all equal custodians, but it's a very powerless perspective. And I think there's enough of like a dopamine ego boost in like wowing people at dinner parties with knowing this dark, shitty information, but the brain has not been trained to push a few steps out of like, well, how would you rather it go? And what is the solution? And what does it look like when we thwart their plans and we do something different? And I don't see a lot of those conversations happening in those communities. They're stuck. And there's an energy in those conversations that I think is manipulating them to stay stuck.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, that's long been something that, like, as a person who, like, in whatever position I consider myself in all of this community, how do I balance those two things, right? Like respect for the reality and the material, and then also like the knowingness that like it only works if it only goes that way if we acquiesce to the demoralization campaign that and this is part of the reason why they, like, you know, that kind of material is always allowed to be circulated, right? You know, like, is because they know, okay, well, we'd rather people not know about it, but at least the people who do know about it, most of them are going to be so paralyzed for so long that by the time they're able to like pick themselves up off the floor and start functioning again, we'll be, you know, we'll have made our end run and whatnot. And so that, I feel like that it's, and maybe this is where, like, maybe I try to do this. I try to balance my delivery of challenging information with a sense of humor and a playfulness that allows people to just sort of like, okay, that's just another thing, and I'm going to take it in like every other bit. Like, there's not one bit that weighs more than the other bit.
Well, I also think, you know, people forget that a big part of the game, which is happening on so many different dimensional levels, is loosh collection. So we are giving them so much loosh by kvetching about their nonsense, you know, like they're achieving their aim, whether it's, you know, scaring the liberals with taking away their right to abort their babies, or scaring us with the internet's going to go out and food shortages and like whatever it is, they're still getting what they want from the species. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that this is where like the disarming laughter, right? The more things that you can be like, oh, isn't that cute? And just kind of laugh, and not because it's not serious, but like just the fact that like somebody would feel the need to go to the extent to create some of these technologies is a sign of their tiny weenie. And that, exactly. It's like, that is exactly the just right thing. Like when you see a guy in LA driving a Ferrari, it's like, how small is your penis? What are you compensating for? If they have to go to this extent to co-opt the media, to demonize truth tellers, do you know what I'm saying? Then it's like, then their plan is super shoddy and shaky. And I agree with like the disarming laughter of like, that's adorable. We're actually taking the planet in a different direction. You enjoy your crazy fantasies, you psychopaths. Yeah. So this, I always want to ask people this question, even myself when I say it, like, what is the level of car that, like, what's the nicest car someone can have without it starting to roll into the how small is your weenie territory? Well, I think, and that's a really good question. I mean, I think that a sports car, like like in LA, I mean, you know, I've been on the planet a few sun spins, have a date with a guy who comes to pick me up with a Porsche. I'm just like, what is the problem that you're compensating for? So I think if it's like a small, impractical speed car and you're living in an urban environment, you have a very small penis. I think if you're driving like a Miata or a Cooper and you're a dude, you're just having a midlife crisis, but you might have a normal size penis. And what if the car is yellow? To me, always like if I just see a yellow car that is like that's like small and maybe like tilted, like twists to the left a little bit or something. I don't know. Yeah, I haven't codified it. I'll add it to the list after puppets. Maybe the puppets can codify the tiny weenie rules of car ownership into some sort of like constitution that you can make. the
about
list.
the Constitution. Okay, all right. Now let's now that we've had a lot of fun. So I'm glad you went and saw. She speaks there probably once a year. She's there on a sort of regular basis. So I'm glad that you got to go. And I know a lot of people who are going to her stuff this time around. But I'm definitely I'm ordering her Sub Rosa series because she's come up in some of my chats with Michael, and so we would like to probably play a few rounds with her if she'd be willing. But I need to. I'm familiar. I'm aware of the sort of topics of her Sub Rosa series, but I haven't read them like I've looked at some of her other books. So take a look.
Just to briefly mention the ongoing synchronicities between you and Michael and me. Today, the Facebook memory popped up from 2018. Which book should I read next? The Glass Bead Game, and it was like an Arundhati Roy book, but I put up a poll about it back then.
Wow. I didn't even know you had read The Glass Bead Game.
I hadn't. Everyone voted for Arundhati Roy, and I just realized today, I need to read that.
So I got The Glass Bead Game about the time we started the show, and I started reading it and then got distracted and so got away from it. So then earlier this year we started again, or like late last year I started again, and I'm almost to the end now. But it kind of is exactly as I imagined it would sort of be. Like sometimes I'm shocked at how well I was able to understand it without having read it. Kind of thing. I really like it. Laura's like, what are you getting from this book? I'm like, I don't know, but for me, like, I really like it. Like, this is sort of the way I sort of take in reality and deal with stuff and then what the output is. And so yeah, so I think you should read The Glass Bead Game for sure.
I agree. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So you are we starting with consilience right now? Are we starting with Lifeboat, or are we just ditching everything and going to CRI? Like, what's happening here?
I didn't find anything on CRI. I think it's a total cover. So let me, I want to pick up one other piece on SFI, and then we'll jump to Lifeboat. And then I think consilience is really the point of focus, because I think that's the legit Ministry of Disinformation.
Okay. I agree. I have a little game going on, with a little word game going on about it that I think is the evidence of that.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Okay. So let me just share this. Not that, right. So that's where I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's really a thing. So I just wanted to follow up on Santa Fe Institute, from which, we could talk about for freaking ever, because there's so much. And David sent me this, which was their, so they're really secretive about who their donors are, as I had mentioned, but this came up.
Scroll back up. Wait, go back up for a second. Stop. For any of the following, okay, never mind. Okay, that has to do with the nonprofit tax designation. I was like, if they're doing something with amateur sports, but that's just part of their designation. Never mind. Okay, continue. Okay,
so these are. I wish my square was a little bit more streamlined. Okay. So this is how much money they're pulling in donations every year. Like, this is big ass money. So 2019, they haven't, we don't know what their 2020, 10 million, over 11.5 million, 16 million, right?
Well, 16 was their biggest year. And I would say but that was their biggest year publicly too. That's when most of these
a lot of planning.
Well, that's also when most of these F-tards really broke through in terms of their media presence with podcasts and being on the circuit and whatnot.
Totally. And I think it's also because my sense is that a lot of the, and I know we're on YouTube.
Oh, wow. Look at that. 22 million in 2015. Right,
yeah,
right.
So that's the biggest
before 2016 election, right? Mm-hmm.
Right before the election. So there was a document, which I have in one of my tabs, but I don't know if it's worth going to, but it did go through their political donations. They're literally 100% Democrat, 100% across the board.
Yep.
No Republicans. So 2014, 13 million. 2012, 6. So we're talking a lot of money is going into this place.
Yep.
Okay.
For something that most people have not heard of.
Yes, exactly. So, so then my research brought me to the Lifeboat Foundation. And we'll jump away from this guy, although maybe we'll come back to him. So in my researching of figuring out what the hell is going on at Santa Fe Institute, I noticed a ginormous amount of the people who are on the boards or in positions of power at Santa Fe Institute were also members of the Lifeboat Foundation. And I recommend that all of anyone watching this do a deep dive into this place, because it would take several years to crack what is really going on here. So basically what it seems
wait, go back. There's something about fringe. Go to the thing about fringe. I want to see what it says about fringe. There's like a little fruit fly or something in my house that's driving me nuts. Okay. It says
you know what's good for that? Venus flytraps.
Ah, yeah. All right. So they just have fringe there on the side,
so
right?
They promote certain things on this, like through their blog, that they're not like legit tied to, I don't think. Okay.
Pre-fringe, sort of like a pre-fringe. Okay, the New York Lifeboat Foundation is a nonprofit that seeks to protect people from some seriously catastrophic technology-related events. It funds research that would prevent a situation where technology has run.
Oh, did I lose you? Are you still there?
Olivia and Peter and the people who were part of their little team were considered the fringe unit of the FBI or the Homeland Security or whatever, right? So a pre-fringe unit. Got it. All right.
Okay, but the other thing is this is not true.
It's not true. Right.
Listen, so as we'll learn, they're not trying to prevent shit. They're absolutely
creating it.
Exactly. They're funding the types of technology and the types of bugs and whatnot that would absolutely create extinction level events. And what they're focused on is post-extinction reality.
Did you ever watch Fringe?
No.
Okay, so that's exactly what happens in Fringe. Like all the things that are being used, right, against them are things that actually Walter in his earlier days had invented. Right. So when Walter was working with William Bell in the MK Ultra projects and in all of this high technology at Harvard and MIT, he had created all of these technologies, and some of them had worked and some of them hadn't worked. And he thought they were all just, you know, stored away. But secretly, this corporation had been taking them and weaponizing them. And then these shadow groups had been penetrating and getting access to and whatever. So basically, it is exactly that. Right? Yeah. Like I'm now being tasked with saving everyone from the bullshit that I create.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So my request is the Lifeboat Foundation, if you'd be cool to pull it up and share your screen, and I'll pull because I screenshotted. It's such there's so much information on their site. It's kind of ridiculous, and their boards are crazy. But so while you're doing that, I'll share some of the pieces that I've screenshotted just to catch us up to speed.
So what do you want me to do?
So scroll to the top. I want the people to see their people. So even their programs, I think it's their programs.
Yeah.
So this is their, all right, you know what? Wait, let me,
just look at the names of their programs.
Yeah, look at the names of their programs. Life Shield Bunkers, Nano Shield, Space Habitats, Biopreserver, Neuroethics. Neuroethics! Why do they have a neuroethics thing? Alien Shield, Antimatter Shield, Black Hole Shield. So one of the things that struck me, I did a few deep dives on their site, which chilled me to the bone, was a lot of the technologies that we're talking about coming down the pipeline, they have clearly had for a long ass time. According to them, we're already colonized Venus, and they have these boards that are, diplomatically creating relationships with these Venusians. It's freaking crazy what they have going on. And then all the people who are involved with that. And again, the amount of people at SFI who are also members of Lifeboat is a little bizarre.
Look at this, the particle accelerator shield, right? So that to me is they're classifying particle accelerator shield along with like climate change and all this other stuff,
And
right?
that's interesting considering how many of them and SFI are connected to CERN.
Right. But to me, this is like, you know, this is on a certain level, this is them fun, like, so you hear when I talk about the FPV angel and the angelic particle matrix stuff, right? That the biggest lie about particle accelerators is that humans that, or at least these humans that are fucktards now, built them. No, they've discovered them and they're trying to understand them and trying to figure them out. But mostly what they're trying to do is cover their own ass, because when it activates at the, you know, at the turn of the cycle or whatever, they want to be able to survive that, and with as much of their as much of the technology and the knowledge that they have cultivated in this cycle intact. So I think that's sort of the, I think that the idea is that as people have figured out how this works, they're not controlling it, but they're understanding it better and better. Every time there's a turnover, they're able to better withstand it, better to survive it, keep their shit intact, while everybody else's who doesn't know anything about it, that crumbles to rubble. So at the next, you know, as civilization comes up again, they're in further control each time. So it's kind of like if you have a class of people, a group of people, or a society of people who have figured out how to reincarnate without losing their memory, and everybody else doesn't. And so they're you know, behind in terms of wisdom and knowledge and things like that, right?
So do you think it's like an inner earth technology that they just accidentally found? And do you think,
Yes.
Are they in contact with the inner earth beings, or are they just acting solo to try to figure it out?
So the best I can say is that I don't like, according to their narrative, and I think this is a lot right, I can't say if it's all right, that the particle accelerators are part of the earth, part of the structure of the earth, right? And so I like, whether they were put there by a person like after the earth was made or after the earth, whatever, or if it was part of the, like, I think what they're saying is that it creates nature. The particle accelerators actually generate the things that we consider to be nature, i.e. elements, dirt, you know, whatever, the things that form what we think of as reality, and that they've always been there, and that what we call now underground bases are actually glorified sarcophagi, and sarcophagi are like control panels from like the original access, right? So I don't know if the control panels were made by the person who put them there or the first person that discovered and started trying to work on them. So I think that at this point there probably are quote unquote modern man-made particle accelerators, but they're not the big ones, right? They're mimics, they're copies of these other ones, these giant ones, and the big ones are there and they do their own thing. And there's an ever increasing amount of awareness and knowledge about how they work, and like maybe when they're going to activate, and maybe even people have figured out how to get them to activate outside of their own natural cycle or whatnot. But then the bigger thing I think is getting other technologies that sort of piggyback or ride on top of them, right? But the evidence, I think that this is right, and that they've always been there, and that they, or at least they've been there for a very long time, is that you will find something in lots of the ancient Indian cave paintings that looks exactly like a particle accelerator. So unless Raytheon was there before the Indians, or Boeing or whatever, which I understand that some of these corporations are many years old, but I haven't heard any of them claim to have been around for 2,000 years, then I think that's what's happening. How is it that right in a place that I've said, I think there's a particle accelerator, then later I find the Indian paintings that have something on it that looks just like a particle accelerator, and it's 3,000 years old, and Boeing is controlling that property and no one else is allowed in there. Right. So it's just kind of, okay, that, you know, so I think that's how that is.
Okay, as you're speaking this, I just have this vision. I would love for you to come out here and for us to go to Chaco Canyon and like feel into like what is actually really going on there. Because as you were speaking, I'm just feeling some sort of connection.
Doesn't Chaco Canyon have one of those rocks that looks like a portal?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a
So I think-
documentary on it. I haven't been, but I'm curious.
Doesn't Chocolate Canyon have Window Rock?
I don't. Is that like one specific rock?
I think I'm trying like what okay, so yeah, so we have something
It's
that
this
looks
big
like,
mystery that's
wow,
crazy.
look at that. Okay, yes, I'm sorry, but that is not like that's a machine of some sort.
Right,
That is a
that's what
machine.
That's why I'm saying I'd like for you to come out here and let's feel into like what it really is. And again, another crazy thing in New Mexico where SFI happens to be.
I feel like is there window where I think Window Rock? Is that in Chocolate Canyon? Where is Window Rock? Window Rock is in Arizona. Never mind. Okay. I don't know why I was confusing the two of those things. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty, maybe because of that. I've probably seen that before and thought that was right. Okay. Okay. The many dimensions of Chaco Canyon. There we go. So they're already letting us know, right? Yeah, I need to go there for sure. I've never been there. My dad's obsessed with it though.
Oh, cool. That's interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So let me just pull. So another thing about this lifeboat that's crazy is, well, hold on. So let me do screen share. I'm choosing my brain to organize. I'm inviting it.
So I think what we're saying, and this was there in the conversation in the Afterward segment last time, that like Lifeboat is like the after hours speakeasy for the people who work at SFI, like the real kooks to just like go buck wild. Okay. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mercer sent me afterwards. That Century Club was the name of the thing I was looking for.
Did you watch that thing that he sent you?
Which thing?
I know he sent us both a link to like a video series, someone's Patreon series. Century Club. I'll look that up.
So Century Club was like all of the people in the psychedelic movement who were working at like Harvard and MIT and all that kind of stuff would sort of like hobnob with bankers and whatnot at the Century Club.
Okay, so a lot of the psychedelic people, including Amanda Fielding and Doblin, are also part of Lifeboat Foundation. And another thing that I want to mention before I forget, and we can come back to this, is that I have a very strong gut feeling that Meow Wolf is being used by SFI, and they're disseminating their fuck rate in the same way that we've been talking about Lucent Dossier and those things, especially now that it's Disney. And I have a friend there who's gonna do some sniffing for me.
Okay, very good.
Okay, so here's their mission statement. Helping humanity survive existential risks as we move towards the singularity. Notice what's highlighted: new methods to combat viruses. So that's their world. It seems like there's quite a bit about that coming out of SFI, coming out of Lifeboat. Effective nanotechnological defensive strategies, self-sustaining space colonies, if the other defensive strategies fail. So a lot of it sounds completely crazy, which was why I reached out to David in the first place. So some other pieces, Jeffrey Epstein is on their board. Now this has been, so here's the thing. If you do a search for Epstein and Lifeboat on the web, it's harder to find. They've like nudged their site stuff in the past couple months since I started doing this research, but it's still on there. He's on one of their, was on one of their boards. Okay, here's mention of maps. They're promoting maps in 2011. And here's the other thing is you do any research, like anything you type into a search bar on Lifeboat, they bounce you to a weird Google page that I haven't seen. If you want to try it on the back end to show us, it's kind of weird. And then you will get like several hundred pages in your search to have to like whittle down and find it. So they're putting it all out in the open, but they're also obscuring quite a bit of it. Okay, Jeff Bezos was their Lifeboat Guardian Award winner in 2021. Gates is a former one of those. Okay, so Jeffrey Epstein was on their advisory board. That was it. Bill Gates was their 2015 Foundation Guardian Award winner. Okay, so this is on their psychology board, and they have, I'm not like hundreds of boards. So remember we talked about Amanda Fielding with Robert Forti? She's the one who's funding Rebel Wisdom.
Yep.
And that op, which is all part of it. Stanislav Grof, part of their psychology board. So this is in terms of like how our audience can help. Start going through these boards that are like hundreds and hundreds of pages long and to see who we recognize.
Well, and also like, why have you ever heard of so many people being on a board? Isn't a board usually like, okay, my first experience with a board was when we were at GO. My dad was on the board, right? There was like, what, how many people were on the team at GO? Maybe 50, 60, right? And so they would have parents meetings, and there were like 8 or 10 parents that were on the board, right? That like, you know, whatever. My dad was on the board for a short period of time. So isn't the idea that the board is like a small group of people that like represent the larger group of people that make up the foundation? So if there's this many people on their board, how many people are in their foundation? Is it an entire civilization? Is this like representative democracy? Like, what the fuck is this?
Well, exactly. And there are people on the board, and I'm just pulling for the screenshots I pulled. And guys, just so you guys know, I've been researching this since December, so keeping it all straight in my head that we're doing it now, it's getting a little bit jumbled. But there are people on this board who are dead. They're dead Nazis on their board, and they are working directly with life extension technology. So yeah, what is really going on?
Okay, so for me, this is kind of like, okay, so that was going to be something that, like, even just with something you were showing earlier, there was like things referencing back to the 80s and whatever, right? So yes, there are people who are dead or people who are very, very, very old, seemingly on boards with people who've only been well known for a couple of years and are in the same age group that you and I are in. Right. So like, that's like an odd thing. Now let's think about like corporations or company. It would be interesting to know how many people are on the board at Twitter, Facebook, Google. Could we find out how many people are on the boards of those organizations that seem to be controlling our lives? Right.
Anytime you and I look up a board, it's like 20, 30 is like the outside max, right? It's usually like a smaller, like half a dozen, 10 people. This is one of the boards that Schmachtenberger's on.
So these are boards of sub-projects of this foundation. Like this is like, right, like this almost feels to me like they transferred the entire MK Ultra division over to this, right? Totally. Like, so when you hear, you know, like when Jan Irvin and whoever discovered, like, I don't know that he discovered it, but when he published the list of like the 267 or whatever sub-projects that he had been able to find. Yep. And then each of them had, you know, an entire task force working on those. And some of the people who were working on it knew they were working on it, and some of them didn't. But the other thing that is fascinating to me that I see on every single page you've showed me from this place is in the same paragraphs, in the same discussions, are technologies that our overlords tell us exist, mixed with technologies that they insist don't exist. And some of those overlords are on the board. So which one is it? Do they exist or do they not exist? Right? And kind of thing. And I see things in here that people who deny that things exist are funding the research of.
Totally.
On these things you're showing me. Now, to your point about the fact that there are dead Nazis on there, I'm like, and I saw that there's like a huge Bitcoin endowment, and back to Kalindi EE. Cryptocurrencies are psychedelic cross-domain currencies, right? So somehow, like, you know, in his show with Sonia from a bit back, this is a psychedelic currency that you can use to cross dimensions with. Right. So like this, to me, this is, you know, these people, like I imagine there is a board. Like I imagine that these people are playing with technologies that allow them somehow to interact with dead Nazis, and whether those dead Nazis had their consciousness uploaded to a hard drive or an internet or whatever, or we're talking about Die Belt or time travel or whatever. Do you know what Die Belt is?
No.
Okay, so that's the machine that they had in The Man in the High Castle to access the other worlds. That the technology is based basically on Indra's Net of Jewels or the glass bead game, right? Because I think the glass bead game is sort of the philosophy of like the Indra's Net of Jewels, right?
Yep.
And sort of the way that you can sort of enter a state of timelessness based on the way you deal with the things you know in reality, right? So to me, that's kind of what this is. Like, this is a collection. Like, when they say someone's on the board, I don't know that they're actually now or ever were taking meetings in the traditional sense that you and I think, but these are like, if they had to develop like a list of people whose work, quote unquote, matters to them, right? And that should be considered and should be part of whatever, you know, technological singularity or utopia that they are creating for us to, you know, go to in the afterlife or whatever. Like, this is a list of contributors to that, you know, sort of layer of the simulation. Yeah. Or it could be that literally, like, we're just being, so I just have to, did I show you this already? Like, bring back up the logo for the Lifeboat Foundation.
Okay, I'm just showing you guys, like, I'm not even, just to do, like, this is
Correct.
their page of boards. And I think it's like membership into a post, I think what it is membership into a post-extinction club. And it's like, we're allowed to be here after we kill the rest of the plebes or something. So
the one thing that, the one thing, and I just looked very briefly at the thing you sent me this morning. What was the name of that CRI? It was the what?
I've got too many things going. It was, so the CRI is the Civilization Research Institute, is allegedly what Consilience Project, which is the Ministry of Truth for SFI, is held under. There's no information about it whatsoever.
Okay, so to me, as soon as I just read your paragraph, I didn't look into it at all. Like, I just did my intuitive pull. Yep. That this is a nod at cryogenics, right? CRI, right? Like that yes. They'll do things like that. Yes. This is a nod at cryogenics, but also SRI, Stanford Research Institute, and what Michael and I have gotten into in SIRS, Schizophrenic International Research Society, right? Yep. So this is like, in that same, this is a really weird fucking little yearbook thing you have up top there that's turning pages. What the fuck is that?
Me?
Go back up, scroll back up. Look at that. This.
Visit our memorial to advisory board members who worked to safeguard humanity until the end of their lives.
Right.
What the fuck does that even mean?
What the fuck is this, right? Okay. So that
allegedly this wasn't even created until 2007. So right. How many people were safeguarding humanity to the end of their lives for, you know, a 15-year-old organization?
Right. Okay. Take down your screen share for a second so I can.
Just so people can see, Asteroid Comet Impacts Board, Life Extension Board, Space Settlement Board. I mean, it's crazy. Okay, I'm out.
Okay. So maybe, well, what if we are just like living in a simulation or inside some kind of video game, or we're even on a movie set or something like that, and Lifeboat is like that whole list of people, all those lists are just lists of people who have participated in a project. Like, have you looked through all the boards? Are our names on a board somewhere? Like, right? Like, is there a back page of this website that, right?
Oh, but there is something hilarious that I have to show you. Yeah, I mean, it does feel like maybe these are people who know it's a simulation and are in a different simulation, or
right,
participating in this simulation. But check this out, just because it's so obviously a stab at David. The Scientific Freedom Board. This board strives to create environments that allow freedom in research to those latter-day Max Plancks who must have it, while at the same time looks to prevent obstacles to scientific freedom, such as patent trolls.
Wow. This board strike, let me see that again. Okay, let me move this so I can see it better. Okay, this board strives to create environments that allow freedom in research to those latter-day Max Plancks who must have it, while at the same time looks to prevent obstacles to scientific freedoms. So they're saying so David's a patent troll. Okay, but that is a fascinating statement. Okay, but you guys saw so here's Lifeboat Foundation. Just one more time for everybody. Lifeboat Foundation. This is their logo right here, right? See the logo? That is their logo. Okay. So this thing that I'm obsessed with, that I if I were really that obsessed with it, why haven't I done the deed yet? But I am obsessed with it. I just haven't had the time. Remember, I'm looking into this whole thing called the Urban Spatial Order, Street Network Orientation, Configuration, and Entropy, right? And these layouts, the grids that they use to lay out all of the cities look exactly like the lifeboat. Look.
I mean, it's those things that you throw to people who are drowning, right?
Right. Right. But like, see, this is the grid that every city is sort of built on in some way. Like, okay, so look at that. So it's that. And then it's also, let me go find this other paper. And again, this is just me going with any kind of like intuitive feels that I have. But this came up in our group chat last week. I'm sorry, I'm looking for the right windows.
You're doing great.
And then I will, okay, this came up, okay? And this also looks like an iteration of that. So Marcy said that, I think you like this person too, named Oracle Girl.
I love Oracle Girl.
Was like talking about something called quadrality.
Oh, she's obsessed with quadrality right now.
Well, but that's like the same thing as the quatrefoil that I talk about. It's like the same sort of idea it's another layer of the same sort of idea. Okay. So I looked up quadrality and I found the rules of quadrality.
Oh, that's crazy.
The totality of God and the Izuname cross.
What's the Izuname cross?
Right. So there's the Izuname cross, right? There is, you saw the lifeboat thing. Just a reminder to people, this is the symbol for New Mexico, is the Zia, which is right. So look at that. Okay. We get back to my Izuname. So I haven't had a chance to read this paper yet, but this is from 2001, and it explains the rules.
Is this where Oracle Girl is getting quadrality from?
I don't know. I just went on my own little hunt and found this.
Okay.
Right? Like,
is Marcy, who lives here, into Oracle Girl?
Yes.
Okay, because there is a bizarre preponderance of people in New Mexico who are into Oracle Girl. Of all the people I know, there are so many concentrated here in New Mexico. It's kind of weird.
I've only ever heard of it.
I've
only ever heard of it from people from New Mexico, right? Yeah. But we got into this, and I like one of the things as your mind begins to go crazier and crazier as mine has, and you become aware of more and more things. It's like you have twice as many, 4 times as many, 10 times as many, 200 times as many things to look at, and half as much time, quarter as much time. It's like growing in the opposite direction.
Fractal complexity.
You practice your own version of sigil magic and like using signs to extract information and go with intuitive stuff, right? Yeah. So I start to just notice. So we have all of this stuff, right? We have the Izuname cross. We have the symbol for lifeboat. We have the grids that urban spatial order is created on. We have the quatrefoil, which I think is a metaphysical time travel device. It's like a self-perpetuating UFO per se, right? Or something like that, that one uses to move themselves through layers of reality or dimensions or timelines or something like that. And they're all sort of iterations of the same thing, right? And once you understand how to use the metaphysics and the physics of that shape and that symbol and that technology, because it's a spiritual technology, you sort of have access, right? And I think that there's like a natural, holistic, spiritual way one learns how to use this technology in their lives. And then there's a more mechanistic way. There's a black magic way. There's an alchemical. There's all these different like ways of doing it, right? And it seems to me that that is at the heart of what Lifeboat Foundation and Santa Fe Institute are, right? That they are basically creating the catalog or the backlog of information relevant to the things that you would need to know if you're deploying this technology to travel throughout space and time, right? And that these are sort of like maybe each one of these people, good, bad, or indifferent, let's take away our bias for a few minutes, right? Like if each one of these people offered some piece of information that was expounded on to create the project or the program that exploited that idea into a technology that could be used for this process, right? And so that, right, and then, you know, and then also in this realm that we are, like everything that they are, everything about that person is sort of an icon or a symbol of that sort of idea or energy, right? So like when we look at Daniel, we see, okay, this person is like a hybrid of Terence McKenna and Karl Marx, right? Completely playing with both ideas, like playing with the ideas of what we would think of as like class warfare, but taking it out of the normal thing where we think about like, oh, like poor people, laborers and workers, and then property owners and oligarchs or whatever, and changing it into like that having to do with like who has the most access to information and the most ability to cleverly wield that information, right? So that instead of like your typical financial or economic power. Yep. And then Terence McKenna in terms of like the artful use of language to create an emergent landscape of ideas to be expressed in a way that is archetypal in nature and plays on like ancient and futuristic energies that are one and the same, right? So like Terence would talk about the archaic revival, right? And if you start to look into something like Tartaria and what's going on right now with people's like sort of focus on that, it could be seen as a type of archaic revival. But when you really look there, there's a technology that seems so far advanced that we don't understand it yet. So that can't be old, that has to be future, but those places are actually the same thing. Like if you look back far enough and you look forward far enough, I have a feeling you're looking at the same thing.
Totally.
Right? It's just an imaginary line in the distance that recedes as you approach it for us now, because there's something we're not grokking or getting about all of this.
Well,
right?
We've been trapped in the illusion of linear time, which has shaped our brains such that until we get out of that, we can't.
We can't, right? And so, and as, you know, and this is kind of, to me, this almost seems like an index, right? That what this really is like, we're going here thinking like, this is a company or a corporation or a foundation. No, this is an index for people.
These are people who know.
These are the people who know, or maybe even they don't fully know, because sometimes it's really hard to do your job as an operative if you know everything, because shit be leaking out left and right. This is the list of people who have been used to disseminate the operation and hidden, like, and buried, embedded steganography, right? Inside of their operation, there actually are the 2 or 3 key salient ideas that the true thing is based on, right? And so when you go looking here, when you go looking at this person's work, you know, with whatever, like anybody who probably understands and has access to like the way this website is really set up, like what is really happening here, goes, okay, like I see this person, if I go look at their work, I'm looking for things that carry this sort of code, like it's an encoded kind of thing, right?
It's got to be totally coded.
This is an index or like a Rolodex. This is like a Dewey Decimal System for where the ideas are stored.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking to more of the coding, moving past, again, the boards that are clearly not counterterrorism.
Wait, go back. But like, it's weird. Like, look at something. I've noticed this on a couple of these things now.
William Burroughs?
Right?
Why is William Burroughs on, or maybe it's a different William Burroughs?
That's a different, okay, but here's my point. it's a different spelling, but maybe that's part of the, that's weird, right? Because you were thinking bros, like I was thinking bros, but there's somebody on there whose like last name is Borg.
Right.
Right. There's somebody on there whose last name is Bender. Right. And I'm not saying these aren't real people or whatever, but there's some underlying secondary code to this.
There's something else. Cosmology board.
I think people are ciphers. I think that like people are ciphers of like bits of information that have been put together over the ages. And when you look at a certain person, they're a collection of all such and such information, right? And like if you understand, okay, and all that is.
It's also interesting to see who's not on these boards. So it's like Schmachtenberger probably contains a lot of the offshoots from the Schmachten, like whatever archetypal role he's playing in this.
Right. This is, so I mean, there's something. Okay, like here, go back up. All right, there's one weird name there. Look at that, Robert M. Stallman, RMS. Robert RMS Stallman. Now, Richard RMS.
Why is it RMS?
Right, he is the guy who believes in open stock. Doesn't he believe in an open internet? Who is Stallman? I feel like he's the one who has like the Open Software Foundation or something like that. But maybe
to the whole open everything. By the way, like I feel like open is another one of their code words. They use it a lot.
Yes.
I'm looking it up on my phone so that I don't lose us here.
Okay. So, but like, oh, I'm just getting dizzy. Whoa.
You okay?
Yeah, no, but this something funny.
I'm telling you, this is a portal. Are you okay? Do we need to pause?
No, I'm okay. But I know what, wow.
Richard Stallman, also known by his initials, is an American free software movement activist and programmer.
Okay, so what?
For software to be distributed in such a manner that its users have the freedom to use, study, distribute, and modify that software. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm glad I'm with you in this. Is I'm not just falling down this rabbit hole by myself. Something is like literally pressing on my head.
Oh, so when I first found this, I was depressed for days. Like it just like shook. It like shook my worldview of like, what the fuck have I stumbled on?
Okay, whatever we've stumbled on here is a thing that we don't completely understand.
This guy's huge, and he's one of the main guys at Lifeboat, Philippe van Nederveld. And this guy, again, so much of this op of the people in charge is just propaganda and media control. Look, Ray Kurzweil's files on it.
But I mean, there's so many on here that it would be almost impossible to look each one of these people up.
But I'm saying it's all hidden in plain sight. To legitimately dive into this would be.
All right, so let's just make this offer right now. If there's anybody out there in our audience that would like to take one board, right? If there's people out there, just pick a board that is the most interesting to you and dig into those people. And then you can come and join us on a show and present us your findings. Yeah, because and none of us.
The futurist board is like, this can't be a board. Look how many people are on. This is just the futurist board.
Right.
I'm still.
Remember when I found, okay, stop your share for a second. Let's go back because I never close anything and it's for this purpose. This is ridiculous.
Okay.
Like maybe once you have done whatever your bidding is for the system and you end up with your name on that list, you've bought your way into the next thing, or you've earned your way into
your VIP wristband. Like that's the list. I think that's the list the post-extinction bouncer is going to use to see who's allowed in to their next simulation or whatever.
Okay, I'm looking for, because I know I left the window open because I always leave all the windows open, right?
I know, I do too.
But I'm looking for here it is, right? Remember, this was the original meeting. Okay, this was the original seating chart for the Rio Grande Institute. Okay, so this was the board. Now think of how big the fucking table would have to be for any of the boards you're showing.
And I'm wondering how many people are on these hidden boards. Yeah, like how could you even communicate with your quote unquote board?
right? Like, how could you communicate? And people like, what is this? That just grabbed me. The entangled limit of everything. Perfect. This is just where I was going to go. Okay. So like how it like, if you're on a board with someone, then someone will refer to that person as your colleague and will hold you rightly or wrongly sort of semi-responsible for being involved in something that they're involved with. How can anybody there on any one of those boards, never mind the other boards within the same organization, keep track of the work that these other people have done? So if some accusation comes out at them of like, oh, you participated in some that led to this, blah, 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 da, 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 da. Like this is like trying to say that like, you know, everybody in your college class at UCLA.
Right.
Right.
It's obviously not a board. It's when you're something else. When
you're a student in a class, look, if you're in the graduating class of 2022 at UCLA that probably has tens of thousands of students in it, like I'm not held responsible for the content of your paper in your thesis. But when you're on the board of a foundation that receives money to, like in some ways it is kind of like a university, but these foundations like, and universities are doing is that people don't understand that. Like it's considered different when you're doing something as like a professional venture than when you're like just a student at the same school. Right. And so like if one person on one of these boards ends up going down for, let's just say the joy, right? The joy or the lollipop, like let's just say, right? Then like most people who sat on boards with them would be questioned about their interactions or their participation.
Like Epstein,
of this, but in things like this, no, right? No, there's like, this would be, this is a catalog. This is not a real thing.
That's what I'm saying. Because all these people are on the boards with Epstein and none of that has come out or been spoken about.
Okay, so look at this. So this is, I don't know what this is, but just, I'm particularly interested in these things off on the side, right? So I don't know what this is. I'll have to read it and whatever it is, but look at these interesting geometries that are being shown here. And maybe this is how all of these connections to all of these people work. But there's also, look at the latest articles, Language and Mathematica, the physicalization of meta mathematics, right? On the concept of motion. And then we've got like, it's time to launch the Wolfram Institute. So now this person who's been involved in this since the beginning is launching his own institute. My guess would be that like each and every one of the people on all of these boards also have their own institutes. And what we end up with is something that looks like this, right? The way everything's all connected. Right?
That makes sense. That makes sense.
This guy is literally explaining the geometry and the physics of this organization. Look at this. Oh, look, it's a fucking 4, right? Like that, right? But I mean, this is probably how, like, my guess would be that there's probably more than a little bit of resonance between a diagram like this and how these boards are interconnected.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see a geometric overlay of these boards.
Right.
And how they connect, like it probably looks something like that.
Yep. Right. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right. I'm gonna have to find myself a pocket dimension without time to go into and study all of this shit.
I told you this particular op is like, in a sense, it's the gift that keeps on giving because it's so fascinating. And it's like, who has the time? When I discovered this, I'm like, shit, do I have to quit all my jobs to figure out what this really is? Okay, so the last piece.
Well, here's the thing. This is what it always comes down to. If it turns out that this is the thing, then it would be worthwhile for you and I to quit all of our other jobs and just dig into this, right? But how many of these exist and they can't all be the one? Now, I haven't seen anything that looks quite like this, right? And so, you know, maybe
this is the nexus for a lot of it, I know, but we found a lot of different nexus points, but just last piece to just make the mystery even freaking weirder is, let me pull it up. All right, so these are the weird boards. I pulled this up for some reason. I'm curious what it was. I don't remember what it was, but let's go down to.
Let's have a contest. Let's have a contest amongst our listeners, watchers, whatever, who can find the strangest page or paragraph of information on this website?
Yeah.
Right? Like that seems like fun too. Panoptic Smart Dust not surveillance, surveillance. Panoptic Smart Dust Surveillance Report from 2006.
2006. This place is freaking crazy. But check this out. Okay. So they have a Facebook page. They have LinkedIn. They have a Twitter feed.
They have a Twitter feed. Isn't that alt-right Nazi shit? But they've got Nazis on their board, so it's okay.
Exactly. Right? But check that they have threat level elevate. So I don't know what GETA alerts are, but it's got to be some sort of like massive extension. Let's go to donors. With all the people who are on this board, check this shit out. My web's a little slow.
What do you get if you donate to them?
Their donor page is the crazy. I don't know if my website's gonna. Oh, here we go. Okay. So total donors.
For the price of a cup of coffee a day, you can join the Lifeboat 500.
Okay. No amount is too small. Now, I after this, I'll jump to the thing that David Martin sent me, and then that'll be it for the day for this. But total donors 5,129. That's not really that many. Okay. Look at this. 247 Electric Expert Electricians, $1. GoBond.co, $1. Heaton and Cook, $1. Michiana Well Drilling, $1. So according to this
is a code for something else, dude.
Code. According to this, they only would have like $5,000 because they only have these $1.
A taxi service. Right? Taxis don't even exist anymore because of Uber. I'm 100% certain they're not interested in funding the next iteration of whatever is going to further drive. This is ridiculous. Cloth masks.
Removal, landscape, like all these order cloth masks or
$1.
It's all irrigation and landscaping and weird shit. Pier installation and remover for $1. Are you fucking
kidding me? You know what this reminds me of? Because this is $1 a day. Do you know what this reminds me of? Tithing. This is a fucking religious thing. This is a religion. These people are tithing. They're giving their dollar on the plate that's passed around at fucking church every day.
But look, Michiana, we've got to look this up because Michiana has come up a few times. We have to look up what that really is.
And there was like Maya Kuna too. There was a Japanese name that was also on a lot of these.
And it's all roof cleaning, tub reglazing. It's the same company, Michiana, but it has all these different like vehicle wrap. What is Michiana? We have to look up what that is. Asphalt.
What's Goshen? All of these things have multiple. It's the same name with a lot of different companies. So Goshen, Michiana, there was like a Japanese sounding one.
Tree care. Their tree care and their snow removal. And this is in Indiana, allegedly. They're also a moving company. They're also
What if all of these companies are like part of creating like the nodes via like smart dust in their products, or like there's something, right? They're disseminating.
And also so 3D, like none of these things have anything to do with nanotech or life extension. It's all dog fence.
Right, but what if there's smart dust or some of whatever what if it's like a sentient material, like a Jeff and I were talking about, I was talking with someone about some material, like what if there's like like the stuff that they make that they put in 3D printers to like render new realities and whatever, right? What if like they're using this shit and all their shit? Okay, but is there anybody that donates more than $1 a day?
Okay, so we have $5 from Advanced Deck Builders of Madison who love what you are doing here. What does what they are doing there have to do with deck building that the entire team would be into it?
So decks, so one of the things that's become very, very clear to me in all of my like metaphysical jaunting around and travels is that the perspective that you look at something from determines what it is to you. So there's all these spots that if you look at downtown Austin from this spot, it looks one way. If you look at it from another angle, it looks like something completely different. If you look at it from over here at night, oh my God, it looks like the fucking Giza Plateau. So decks are like, right? Decks are decks like on houses, right? Like decks would be where that you observe something from, the observation deck, right?
Okay,
But
what about dumpster rental?
right. But I mean, I'm sure they're surveilling people's trash.
Oh, look at this. Security guard services in Austin is
$10.
paying $10.
Fishing network did $2.
Epoxy Halifax. This is insane.
This is
This collection of businesses makes no powder coating. So that speaks to what you're talking about with the nanotech. Look at this. I'm glad I'm able to donate to such a great cause. You are doing God's work. What?
Right. This is a religion. I told you this is the tithing plate.
And look how, again, they've had a total of lifetime total of 5,129 donors. And they're all these like $1 and $2 oil field hauling, lawn care.
All right, guys, people, I'm going to include the link to the website in the description box.
It's lifeboat.org. It's super easy.
You take the page that you are. What if this is the ark? What if this is like Noah's Ark and it's not like objects? It's ideas or information or data chains or whatever, right? And so people, when they're making their donation, they're like paying for their access or their spot on the boat, the lifeboat.
There was not one person there wasn't a doctor, there wasn't a law firm, there weren't educators. It was all like blue collar,
right?
Roofing, asphalt, plumbing.
But if a group of people is going to be saved from destruction, they're going to need someone to help them reconstruct reality. They don't want to do that work for themselves, right? So like they're going to need someone to build me my fucking smart house, and it hasn't, unless it's building itself. I have no idea what the fuck this is. But I would like to invite the listeners to participate. Let's make this a group research project. And when somebody has dug in deeply into any one of any of the boards or any of these pages or figured any of this shit out, you can come on and do a show with us. And also we'll come up with some reward for someone who's able to find the strangest page or the strangest item of information on this website. Like we'll come up with something really good, like maybe like a personal puppet show. Something really
it'll be worthwhile because I've been buried in this and have clearly not cracked it. So this is their ProRepublica nonprofit tax filings thing. So 25K, they're operating at a loss. Although all I can tell is, and they're out of Nevada, 14K, but then they had, explain this, 130K in 2014.
This is their, what is this is their
tax filings for being a nonprofit.
Okay, so the other page was the other thing you showed me. SFI, okay.
Yeah, and this is Lifeboat. And keep in mind, a big chunk of the people at SFI are a part of Lifeboat Foundation.
Okay.
And they're working on a lot of the same projects. So just to give you an idea, I mean, they're pulling in a lot. They were pulling in a lot of cash from roofers and asphalt layers, especially in 2014, and then seemed to take a dive. What happened here? What was that about?
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So that's
all right. So are you ready for my contributions to today's public portion of this? So the first is, I think that like there's a few other there's a few people that we should add to like who I think are part of the layer that's being generated out of this. Like it isn't just your Schmachtenberger, Weinstein, whatever. I'm going to say that Elon Musk and Bill Maher are part of the same club because I'm watching so if you look like the latest round of like Bill Maher sort of like starting to sound more reasonable came at like the same time that Elon Musk started his Twitter push, right? Like seemed to be generated from the same period of time.
I have a theory about that, but please continue.
Okay, because I was thinking about this when I was been listening. I was thinking about this yesterday, right? So I think that we need to look at them as part of this operation too. Obviously, they're all on the board at Lifeboat, but in terms of the thing that we've been talking about of like this layer that's being created that, you know, that we've talked about for a long time, that includes all these guys that were part of like the intellectual dark web and this like psychedelic
hold up. I promised Amy and Meredith that we would take their name change. It's intellectual dark web.
Intellectual dark web, right? But I mean, there's like a lot of branches of this, right? And I, you know, like, and I'm starting to see how there's other people who I wouldn't have thought of as being connected to that, that really is. Like the reason that they're all championing Elon Musk is because he comes from the same thing, right? And Bill Maher is sort of like, you know, if you, he's been making the rounds. He's been on with, you know, Joe Rogan and Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin and all these people, right? Like it's part of the consilience, right? Kind of thing. So people, anybody who thinks that Elon Musk is bringing free speech or freedom or all this guy is the fucking retard, right? But it's this way, it's like this walk back, right? The system likes to like, they try and push things as far as they can. And they know at a certain point, people are going to say no. So then you have this thing, it's the thesis, antithesis, synthesis thing, right? So then you have someone coming along who says like 2%, like a few things that the people who oppose growth system like, and they're like, okay, well, we'll take it because it's better than nothing, right? That's what so to me, I was doing wordplay with consilience because it's a fucking weird sounding word. And what I came up with is conspiracy, consent, consensus, resilience, conspiracy of silence, right? Okay, so think about this. This is build back.
Conspiracy of silence, I like
this
that.
Is build back better for the people who question build back better, right? Nobody, all the people who are conspiracy minded or kind of, you know, right-wingish or opposed to the Great Reset or any of that kind of stuff, they roll their eyes when Joe Biden says build back better, or any of these other, you know, petty dictators from around the world say the same shit over and over, Trudeau, Merkel, blah, 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 right? The word consilience basically kind of means the same thing. Look at that definition, right? Like, look, like, you know, it's sort of like taking, like, look at it. If you think about it in like a very extrapolated kind of way, it basically means the same thing. Right. And one of the things that this
etymologically, I think we did this last show, concurrence, coincidence, a jumping together. That's interesting that it's tied in with coincidence. Coincidence,
right? But like we could think about reconciling, right? When we reconcile, it's like you have two things that are opposed to each other, right? And then you bring them together so to move forward better. When a relationship reconciles, it's fallen apart and then it's come back together with a new agreement to move forward. Consilience, right? So like this is obviously something that is targeted. It's both targeted to attack the conspiracy crowd, but also to attract the conspiracy crowd. It's like this weird thing, right? And then, you know, but requires consensus. So what I've noticed, and this is one of the things that like I noticed during the Occupy Wall Street kind of thing, they started losing any power when they started doing this thing that before they could do anything, they all had to come to consensus about it, which means everyone has to agree, right? Consensus, okay? And then the resilience is this build back better. The word resilience is basically, I'm sorry, I said consilience is build back better. What I meant was resilience is build back better.
Okay.
Right? Resilience is basically like something bad happens and then you bounce back and you come back to being as good or better than you were before. That sounds.
Also means recoil. In terms of its etymology, which is interesting because that's like the last thing that's what we're doing with build back better is recoiling.
So there's all this weird, I'm not saying like, these are the words that came up for me when I think that word consilience just keeps, it's like the weirdest thing. It's like, it takes all of these ideas, but I think basically what it is it's about building consensus, right? And so it's a pile of horse shit, but it's a pile of horse shit that throws every sort of oppositional group a bone. Right? It's like Andrew Yang or Tulsi Gabbard or whatever.
That's
like
interesting. What's that prize you get when you like lost, but you still get a prize?
It's a consolation prize.
So we're also getting the consolation
prize. So it's kind of like, and this has been the whole thing with like the Weinsteins, right? It's like everybody, think about how many people, including us at a time, like by the time they started their virus op, we were on to them. But back when they first like broke onto the scene, you and I kind of fell for it hook, line, and sinker, right? But look at what's happening here. You have a group of people who like know that the way the media is portraying the joy in the lollipop is obviously completely bullshit. Thank you to Shane for the lexicon, right? So that is obviously bullshit, but everything's been bullshit for so long that if there's somebody who formerly was, purveyor of bullshit comes along and says, you know what, that bullshit is one step too far. I'm going to say this thing that is obviously true, but nobody else will say it. So you're literally throwing the cheapest bone to people who have been so desperate or hungry for somebody outside of their echo chamber to acknowledge something that's obviously true.
Yeah.
Right. And so they're using that to help build consensus. Right. They're throwing like a small bone to this group of people and like whatever their idea is, like they're throwing obvious bones to like the psychedelic community. Okay, we'll legalize it, but we want it controlled like this. You can trip on mushrooms, but it has to cost $55,000 a pop, or, and whatever.
We get our grubby hands on it first.
Right. But so it's just like using small bones to build consensus. It's like, offering, like you beat the child and then you offer them a small piece of candy and the kid are like,
well, that's exactly, what Brett and Heather, they're serving with the alternate lollipop that's coming down the pipeline. Right. That will be the better lollipop that we'll be required to have, but it'll be okay because it's Brett and Heather approved.
Right. But even within all of this, the purpose of this thing is to build consensus among people who otherwise are generally in disagreement with the system as a whole and with each other, right? So if you could have some of these characters, and every single one that we talk about when we talk about any of these, who I call them, like, I'm not going to say it, it's just not nice. But when we talk about any one of these finger puppets, right, that's basically like what they're doing. Each one of them offers like a bone, like a very tempting bone to a group of people that is so desperate for a bone that they're willing to go along with all the rest of the dumb shit that person says, because like, at least they represent this one thing I like.
Yep, totally.
And so it's building consensus, and that they want rule by consensus, rule by like we all sort of agree, like we each get one thing we want. And that one, it's like having like a bus, like an ugly bus, and you get to put your magnet on it, and it's metal, so it'll stick, right? So I have this, like each thing you care about is a magnet, and you get to put one magnet on the bus, and that bus drives forward with it's like a coalition of all of this kind of stuff, but none of us put the bus together. The bus was pre-existent. It had this idea of what it was and where it was going, and we just got to attach our magnet onto it.
Okay, what I'm getting from this is that, and I think what you're tapping into with consilience is that it's loaded with so much programming and weaponization. And what I'm also getting is so many people at Santa Fe Institute and at Lifeboat Foundation are working with language and linguistics. And I think in terms, and this is where the conversation where Daniel dropped out of our exchange, when I was like, let's track how weaponized language is co-opting people's minds, is I think—
you're like, oh shit, you can't do that, I'm doing it. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that they're the ones who have the technology to weaponize language that is allowed, what we're seeing now when we have conversations with friends and you're like, where is your brain? Where is your critical thinking? I think that weaponization of words is coming out of these organizations.
Yes. And I thought of a better way of explaining it than a bus with magnets. When you pull up behind a car that has like a lot of bumper stickers or decals on it, and like most of them are things that you either don't know what they are or you disagree with, but there's like one or two on there that you do like. And so it softens you to the whole idea of this ugly car with all of these stickers on it, or like, kind of like, right. Or that you, right. Like if it was just a car full of stickers of things that you disagreed with, right?
One piece that you can identify with.
That
you embrace the driver in the car when it's
yes.
really just this one thing.
It's really just this one thing, but you somehow feel less threatened by that at that point than a car that has all stickers you don't like, or a car with no stickers at all, because you don't actually know anything about the car with no stickers at all. So you'd rather go with the monster you know than the one you don't, or kind of thing, right? This person has told me everything about themselves, and all of these people have said all this shit, so they're putting it out there. They've said a bunch of crazy shit, and even if they haven't identified themselves well enough for us to know who they really are, that they have a Wikipedia page, they've certainly talked a lot. And so we've gotten their whole boatload of information. And for some people, that one sentence they said that they liked, because that one sentence got you hook, line, and sinker, right?
Totally.
Right. So like, that's the way that this is moving and going. And then you said something else about, there was something else that came up in there.
I was talking about the weaponization of language.
Oh no, I know it. I just had a clarity on something completely separate, but it came to me while we're talking. So I think it has to be a thing. I'm looking at your background, which is your Sadie hand-drawn Sri Yantra. Which one is it? What's the name of that one?
I think it's called a Sri Yantra. It's a 1,000-petaled lotus.
Sri Yantra, but okay, yeah, there's a couple different kinds of Sri Yantras or Yantras or something. Maybe that's just the only one. And I'm thinking the idea of psychedelic Freemasonry came into my, I've never heard of that. I've never heard anyone say psychedelic masonry, but when I'm looking at your thing, for some reason that came in a show a few weeks ago, that we got into some idea of like masonry in the metaverse. But I don't know if there's any entries anywhere on the internet about psychedelic Freemasonry, but I'm feeling nauseous right now. I'm like belching and burping as I'm saying this. So I think this is something for us to look into, whether it openly or not. I'm looking at that and I'm like, okay, a lot of these sort of more esoteric spiritual paths are some sort, like the co-opting and the weaponization of them as part of some sort of psychedelic Freemasonry. Well, it doesn't even have to be weaponization. There could be a perfectly reasonable experience of that as well, right? But I don't know why.
No, I do know why. It's going to take us into our second half just perfectly. But so many of the front people for this op have inserted themselves in the psychedelic space, and it's clearly connected to these Masonic intentions and nefarious agendas. I mean, you have, Aubrey Marcus talks quite a bit about psychedelics. We've talked about this, Jamie Wheel and David Fuller, and we have Amanda Fielding in it, MAPS being part of it. So I do think it's a melding, especially given this sort of like, the decriminalization of a lot of these substances that are allowing it to be more easily embraced.
Okay, so I found this when I looked up psychedelic Freemasonry, alchemically stoned, the psychedelic secret of Freemasonry. P.D. Newman's bold and daring theory provides a radical interpretation of Masonic symbolism.
Are there any visuals on this?
It's produced by Brain Layer Books. That's interesting name. All right, let's see what we got here.
Who wrote it? P.D. Newman?
P.D. Newman, who I've never heard of before. This is the cover. This is from 2017. Just looking to see if there's anything else. But of course, all this stuff looks like shit you see when you're on mushrooms, right? Mm-hmm. QAnon's unexpected roots in psychedelic Freemasonry, maybe? Right. So, but like, it's just funny. I've never even thought of those two things together. Look at this. This gave me something to the Eastern Iowa Circus. And this also comes up. Meet upon the level, part upon the square.
Have you pinpointed Masonic symbolism in like the Lucent dossier stuff or any of the sort of more psychedelic? I mean, even like Alex Gray, I'd be curious. I mean,
so I've pinpointed Masonic symbolism in my own psychedelic trips, right? So that they would be there in that stuff. I don't know what that is I don't even know what that would mean at this point. Like, I'm looking at this picture that is his thing, and I'm saying, I've never heard of this book before. It
has your Masonic floor.
Right, but I see, when I'm on mushrooms, I see shit like this, right? Like, I see shit that looks exactly like this. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm gonna need to check into, okay, so the foreword to this book was written by this guy, The Lost Rites and Rituals of Freemasonry.
And that's another yantra.
Another yantra. We have that yantra sitting over in the choir, both of the yantras, that one you have and this one sitting right here in this house. This is part of something called Project Awe.
Well, there's also shock and awe. Isn't that one of our wars?
Yeah. So PD Newman did the DMT Experience podcast. All right, I'm going to need to take a further look into this when we're not on the.
I think psychedelic Freemasonry is I'm intrigued by that.
Me too. I don't know why I haven't thought about this before, but everything in its right time, I suppose. Okay. Oh, wait. Look at this. This can't. Yogi, so this is about the Bikram story. Yogi Guru Predator came up when I looked up psychedelic Freemasonry.
Oh, it's a Netflix as well.
Yeah, I've seen it. I watched the series. Yeah, but that it's always funny to me, the things that the free association. So I looked up, it dawned on me that, right? Okay, so lots of things to explore here. Again, this is another one of those episodes that's kind of like all over the place. And I always feel better about myself when we tie everything up with a neat little bow on it, but I just don't think that's the reality we're in anymore.
Well, this is an ongoing series, and what you just brought up ties us into part 2 perfectly. And we'll continue to unpack this.
So it's interesting, like, I don't know why you suddenly decided to draw that and to make that your background for all our shows, but I feel like it's doing something to me. Like, I feel like this is more of a truth about how you and I know each other. I feel like there's a space that exists outside of what we think of as our regular physical, spatial, temporal reality, in which you and I have always been connected. Like, we had this connection in physical reality as children, and then we reconnected later. But there's this psychedelic Freemasonic lodge that exists outside of time, where you and I have been paired in our whatever projects and programs for a really long time. And I think that's actually probably the source of, when I was feeling that stuff, it was about what we were finding on the lifeboat kind of thing. But there's something we know about this from that space. There's something we understand. I feel like all I have to do is remember how the Rolodex works. It's not that I have to figure it out. It's that I have to remember.
I think so, because as I've been, working on this and even prepping for today's show, I was like, how did I even find this? And it was just like so many hunches, it's all this intuitive stuff that doesn't make logical sense that landed me here. And so maybe that's what you're talking about. I mean, do you want me to change the background? No.
I think it's an important part of the process. When I did that show with Andy Colvin, we talked about psychic jumps. And it's like, for some reason, I don't know why, I just know when this thing happens, I know to go look over here. And everyone's like, how would you know that? Like, why would this make you think that?
Right.
And the only thing I can think of is because we're not actually trying to figure something out. We're trying to remember something.
We're remembering.
Right? There's just a missing piece. There's probably 4 steps in between that we haven't remembered yet, but for some reason we remember the things out of order or whatever, and those pieces will fill in. But I think that's what's happening here, right? Like, I think this is why I keep all of these windows open on my computer, because it's like when you have the answer to the math problem, but you don't know how, you haven't done the work, right? So you have the answer, but you don't understand why that's the answer. And we're trying to fill in that space in between.
Yeah.
And when we fill in that space, then we'll remember how the Rolodex works, because that's a Rolodex.
I think so, because it also has me thinking about, like, we've been on Brett and Heather for years now. And there were moments where it wasn't really clear. It was just like more like opinion and conjecture. And now the pieces are coming together through consilience that are backing it up. But it's like these hunches that have been driving this for the past couple of years that we've been doing it.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to move over to Afterwords, and we're going to talk a little bit about this podcast that just came out today. Was it today? It was this morning I sent it to you. Got this date? Was it yesterday? Yesterday. A Rebel Wisdom podcast with Daniel Pinchbeck, who we've also spoken about, many times. That is exactly like what you're talking about. Like, it's been this hunch, it's been this kind of stuff. And then suddenly a piece of something appears that just kind of sums it all up in one fell swoop in an hour. And it's like, okay, so we're going to dig into that on the other side. Danny, what do you have to say to people before we go?
Subscribe to my new podcast on Spotify, on Google, on Amazon. Join me on Locals for the second half of all those awesome conversations, dannycats.locals.com, and do your lifeboat research. We thank you.
All right. And you guys can find me on patreon.com/offplanetmedia, emilymoyer.locals.com, or rockfin.com/Emily Moyer. But if you want to find the video version of this Words podcast, the best thing to do is go over to our Afterwords, to go over to our new Words Locals page, wordspodcast.locals.com. There will be a promo code down below so you can join us for a free month. And Dani has something else to say.
We forgot to remind the people that we did an addendum to Words 58 that is on our Words Local.
Only available there.
Only available there. And we filled in some of the pieces that weren't quite so YouTube friendly on our last show. So check that out to catch yourself up to speed.
What she said. All right. Afterwards, number 59 on the other side, link to find it down below. Bye-bye.